In 1818, Karl Marx was born in Prussia. By the time he reached the University of Berlin, he was deeply immersed in the philosophical ideas of Hegel, shaping a mind that would soon challenge the established political order. Marx came of age during the European revolutions of the 1830s and 40s. All around him, the contrast was stark: a wealthy, land-owning upper class on one side, and an increasingly impoverished, exploited working class on the other. At the time, traditional historians like Leopold von Ranke recorded a very specific version of the past. Their history focused exclusively on the diplomacy of elites, the lineages of kings, and the outcomes of wars. Marx saw an opportunity to use history as a tool. He shifted the analytical focus away from the aristocracy and began writing about everyday laborers, creating a framework meant to expose and dismantle their oppression. He called this framework historical materialism. Human history is driven primarily by physical, economic systems. Humans must secure basic survival needs: food, shelter, clothing, before anything else. After this economic base is established, society builds its superstructure, institutions like law, politics, and religion. Because the base supports the superstructure, the economy determines how a society thinks. The group that controls the tools of production inevitably ends up writing the laws and shaping the political reality to protect their own interests. When you trace the timeline of human society through this lens, you aren't looking at a progression of abstract ideas. You are tracking the transfer of material wealth. Marx argued that society only moves forward through friction, specifically the inevitable conflict between the bourgeoisie, the people who own the tools, and the proletariat, the people who only have their labor to sell. This graphic breaks down Marx's stages of societal evolution. First, feudalism, where peasants surrender labor to landowners. Next, capitalism, where laborers sell their hours to factory owners. Marx predicted this would cause the working class to unite and establish a shared modern industrial society. Transitioning between historical eras occurs when a society's mode of production can no longer sustain its current structure, necessitating a shift in control. This chart highlights how Marx's focus on the working class splintered traditional historical study. It generated 4 new analytical disciplines: social history, economic history, labor history, and Marxist historiography, breaking the monopoly of elite-centric narratives. Other thinkers built on this foundation. Friedrich Engels, in Anti-Düring, cemented the argument that the physical tools of production dictate the shape of a society. Vladimir Lenin adapted the theory to analyze global expansion, arguing that imperialism was the final, most crisis-prone stage of capitalism. Decades later, scholars like Eric Hobsbawm and Antonio Gramsci applied Marxist methods to study global labor movements and how the upper class uses culture to maintain its grip on power. Marx introduced a specific method of inquiry that researchers still use to decode the power dynamics of any given era. Looking at this infographic, we see cracks in Marx's predictions. Panel 3 shows capitalism didn't collapse. Free markets remain dominant, raising working-class living standards. In Panel 4, evidence proves violent revolution wasn't the only path. Nations secured workers' rights through elections, reforms, and welfare. Panel 5 details the consequences of implementing his theories completely. Communist states, like the Soviet Union, collapsed under economic weakness and authoritarian rule. Finally, Panel 6 highlights a massive blind spot. Marx dismissed religion, ignoring how faith often drives moral guidance and social justice. The historical record points to a clear split. Marxist theory is a highly effective lens for identifying economic exploitation, but it is a demonstrably flawed roadmap for predicting the future. While his prophecies for a global communist utopia were not realized, the analytical shift Marx started persists. By breaking the focus on kings and treaties, his methods carved out the space for the social and labor history that defines research today. Because of this framework, historical analysis broadened to include the everyday laborer. We now recognize that the struggles of the working class and the push against economic oppression are central to the human story. Historians can no longer look at a major event without checking the ledger. They are forced to ask who holds the wealth, who wields the power, and who is paying the price.